So a little bit about me that isn't in the program. I've been a speaker, a writer, I work as a coach, and I get to spend my days writing and speaking and teaching all kinds of material that's geared up and helping women move forward in their lives. I won several writing awards. I actually sang with the Fort Wayne Philharmonic. Hannah and I are kindred singers in heart, although she's way better than I ever was, so we just let her do that. But that's a little bit of some of my background and some of my experience. And you know, when you come to a function like this, or you read about anybody, they always give you these great introductions, right? And you can read in that program glowing remarks about myself, and Tony, and Hannah, and even Paul's place. And whenever we do an introduction, we always want to put our best foot forward, right? We want everyone to know about the great things that we've done, the things that we can put on our, yep, I did that, on my accomplishment list. Maybe some of the great things that we have accomplished or that we've won or that we can say that we've done. But if I was to be really honest with you and to be really transparent with you, my introduction would go like this. Hi, my name is Christie Browning, and I'm a convicted felon. I have a string of felonies that come from the same time and the same case, and I'm a convicted felon. And I would like to tell you that that all came from some youthful indiscretions where I was young and crazy and foolish and made a lot of bad choices and went down a wrong path. And I wish I could tell you that that all stems from a broken home full of dysfunction, with parents that neglected me, that were abusive, that I fell into drug and alcohol use and addiction, that I lived a promiscuous lifestyle, just kind of running around with no aim or direction. That I wasn't really worried about education because I was worried about survival. That I didn't know God, let alone walk into a church. But that's not my story. In fact, my story is actually the polar opposite of that. I grew up in a home that was probably, could have been a secondary set for the Donna Reed show. Anybody remember Donna Reed? And in my life, I grew up with parents that were high school sweethearts. They married young. But about at the age of 3, my parents found God, found church. And for as much as I can remember, the whole church thing was my life. My dad was a musician, and he worked really hard for his family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And when Dad would come home from work at night, we would all sit down and have a family meal together about 6 nights out of the 7 nights of the week. We would bow our heads and pray before every meal. Dad would always end our meal with a devotion. We'd read the Bible together as a family. And then we'd have to spend that gross time doing homework after that. But that's what my life was like. My parents were leaders in the church. I was really involved in church myself. I was a leader in my youth group, and I was one of those kids that all of the teenage boys' moms were like, oh my gosh, if that girl would just date my son, it would be so great. In fact, my younger sister, who's 5 years younger than me, came up right behind me in the same sort of path and the same excitement for church, and it was an ongoing joke in our church that the Workman girls, that's my maiden name, Workman, the Workman girls, if my kids, my sons, would just hook up with the Workman girls, that would be awesome. And so that was my life. I went to a really good school, got great education. I actually graduated in the top percentiles of my class. I earned an academic scholarship to go to college. And I was in college for about 1.5 years when I realized I hated it and I didn't want to be there. If only I'd had Hannah's insight to know God's calling before I landed in college. So I left college and ended up joining a ministry team that toured the country doing anti-drug abuse and anti-violence programs. And in doing all of that, we also shared our faith with high school students when we had the chance. And that's what I spent most of my college time doing. I met a man, got married, moved to Indiana. And about year 3 of the marriage, something wasn't right. Couldn't put my finger on it, couldn't identify what it was, but it just wasn't right. And I went on a quest. I did everything but charter a horse and wear a shining suit of armor quest to find out what was missing. And ultimately, I ended up making some really bad choices at the age of 30. I had a rebellion stage late in the game. But at age 30, about 33, I remember sitting at my office and I got a phone call from my attorney that said, Christy, I just found out the Indiana State Police, in conjunction with the county prosecutor, is filing a warrant for your arrest, and you're going to need to turn yourself in. I never smoked. I never drank. Didn't sleep around. Went to church. Quote you scripture backwards and forwards. But I have a warrant out for my arrest. The process beyond that is so grueling, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go along this morning. But I'm here to tell you that the story isn't always as it seems. In fact, you hear a lot of people give a testimony about what God or church or their faith did for them, and usually it goes like this. Oh, I made a lot of crazy decisions, and I did a lot of crazy things in my life, but then I found God, and all was good. And my story isn't that way. My story is, I had God, it was good. I royally screwed it all up. And then I had to find God again. And I was really ashamed at that equation, because it wasn't the way God would have intended it to be. And I hid behind that for so long, because I didn't want anyone to know that I had it, and that I really messed it up. But then I remembered this guy that I know, and you may know him too. His name's Jonah. You usually know him as Jonah and the whale. I remember Jonah from Vacation Bible School days, the old flannel boards that you used to put the things on, right? Anybody else remember those? Yeah. So, Jonah and the whale. And the thing I love about Jonah, we can read his story in the Bible, kind of tucked in the Old Testament. Among all of those Old Testament heavy hitters, we read Jonah's story. And if you don't remember all about Jonah, let me tell you really quickly about him. He knew God. God said, hey, Jonah, I want you to go to this city called Nineveh and tell them about me. And the city of Nineveh was known to be somewhat dicey. It probably would make the inner cities of some of our more urban areas look somewhat tame. And he was scared. Jonah's like, I don't want to go there. And so he decided to run in the opposite direction. And it's so much that he ran that he boarded a boat with some fishermen and headed across the sea. And while he was on the boat, this ginormous storm hits. And it's so violent that it threatens to rip the boat apart. And the fishermen are on the boat going, holy cow, what have we done to deserve this? What have we done to upset the gods? Little g, plural, gods. And Jonah realizes what it's really all about. And he comes to the fishermen and he says, hey guys, my bad. It's totally me. If you will throw me overboard, I'm sure that the storm will calm down and you'll be spared. And so the fishermen say, okay, can you only imagine what that conversation was like? I mean, talk about keeping your enemies close and yeah, I can't imagine. So they throw him overboard. And if you read in the book of Jonah, it says, God sent a whale. Well, thanks, God. God sent a whale. He couldn't send a yacht or a ski boat. He sends a whale that swallows Jonah. And for 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah is in the belly of the whale. Now, I read that story. And before my personal experiences, I always just thought of that as a really fun vacation Bible school with the fun flannel boards and, oh yeah, he lived in a whale. But when I lived in my whale, that story took a whole new meaning. See, Jonah knew God, and we don't know exactly the extent of his relationship with God. We just know that he knew God enough that when God said, hey, go, he knew he was supposed to go, and he didn't want to. And fear drove Jonah all the way across the sea to go through some serious forethought in how he was going to get across the sea. This wasn't just a, I'm going to dodge God. This was a, what plan can I put in place? Somewhat deceptive, you could say. What plan can I put in place to get on board and get away? Funny that he thought he could run away from God. I don't know about you, but I've tried to do that too. Haven't chartered a boat yet, but I've done some other things. Thought I could run away from God. And Jonah did the same thing, and fear is what drove him to almost death. Fear is what drove me to prison. Fear told me that I had to please everybody. I have a disease to please. I'm a recovering approval addict. Don't know if anybody else understands that. But I would move heaven and earth to get everyone on my side. I remember going to a counseling session once, and the counselor looked at me and said, Christy, can I be really honest with you? And I said, yes, please. What is wrong with me? And he says, if your parents were sitting here on this side of you, and God was sitting here on this side of you, and they were both telling you to do two different things, both equally good, you would always side with your parents. Drop the mic. That was a truth bomb. And that's exactly where I was. In everything I did, and not just my parents, but my spouse at the time, everything I did was to make everyone else happy, even if it meant doing something wrong. And so I played the rob Peter to play Paul game. Anybody familiar with that game? Anybody familiar with I'm writing a check today and hoping I can get to the bank in 2 days to put the money in there to cover it? Anybody play the, I can fudge that number on my tax return or on my bottom line? I played that game. I thought I played it really well. Until I got the phone call that said, there's been a warrant out for your arrest. So we look at Jonah and we see that he's on the boat and the waves threaten to tear the boat apart. Don't you figure that those fishermen that were with him got a little wet? I will tell you that in my personal experience, and I know this is true for almost all of us, when we make a decision, right or wrong, the ripple effect doesn't start and it doesn't end with us. In my situation, my indiscretions, my felonies, my case created a tidal wave of destruction in my marriage, in my financial well-being, with my parents, with my church, with my town. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, but I've lived in Columbia City for almost 15 years. And when you live in Columbia City, and any of you here live in Columbia City, you know this to be true, everyone kind of knows what's going on. They may not know you, but they think they know you, and if they don't know you, they'll figure out someone who does know you, and they'll get to know you really fast. And so as soon as everything started happening with my case, guess who got a headline on the front page of the Post and Mail? This gal. But there's an ironic twist to that story, so hang on to that piece of information. And so everyone knew I got hate mail. I got nasty phone calls. I got this in the grocery store. People wanted to avoid me. All of a sudden, everything they thought they knew about Christie, they called into question. And the wave of destruction threatened to tear everything that I had apart. And as Jonah sat in his boat and realized that it was him that was causing the tidal waves, him that was causing the storm, his sin, his fear, he had to stand up and go, it's my bad. And I was in prison about 2 weeks into the ordeal, and I said, my bad. My bad. I did this. This is happening because of me. See, I tried to blame a lot of people in the process. I tried to blame my spouse. I tried to blame my family. I so much as told my dad that all of his overbearing parental styles brought me to this point. And when you go to prison, you actually find a lot of people that have a lot of really crummy situations. And you don't even realize that people truly do live that way, in Indiana at least, you know. I remember meeting women whose parents sold them for drugs, moms who pimped out their daughters, fathers who sexually molested and abused, or allowed for them to be sexually molested and abused for fun. Parents that harmed their kids, kids that harmed their parents. I mean, these lives were nothing like mine. And I remember standing there going, I am so wrong to point the finger. This is my bad. This is my fear. These were my bad decisions. I went so far as to being in prison and writing my dad a letter telling him how I felt about him and everything that I thought he had done to cause this. You want to talk about a tidal wave that destroys a relationship. Talk about getting a letter like that from your kid in prison 10 hours away from you that you can't see, that you can't talk to, and that is emotionally removed from you. That's the way it was. It wasn't probably too long after that that I had that revelation that it was all my wrongdoing, and I wrote a different letter to him saying, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. And there was a string of conversations that happened between my sister and me, my mom and me, friends that I had that were all so upset, you know, and disappointed in what I had done. And I had to do major repair work to put that boat back together, to save what I had, to kind of create a calm after the storm and those relationships. It didn't happen overnight. It took a little time, but it worked. And it was okay now. And now I feel like our relationship's even stronger because of that. But then we go on to see that Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the well. My belly of the well was not 3 nights or 3 days. I would have opted for that sentence way more than what I got. I spent 9 months at the Indiana Women's Prison here in the state of Indiana. I did about 2 months total at the county jail, 90 days on home detention, more than 2 years on probation, spent almost $10,000 in paying back fines, fees, and court costs, and did almost 150 hours of community service. 3 days, 3 nights. I would have liked that, I think. But that was my belly of the well. My belly of the well was a prison cell. And when Jonah went into the belly of the well, I don't know if you guys remember the old Disney movie, Pinocchio. And you know there's that scene where Pinocchio takes the pirate ship into the well? And I love that scene because they're in what looks like a cavern with red walls. It doesn't look like a belly. It doesn't look like a whale. They even burn a bonfire in there. And they have a party, kind of, in the belly of the well. But I can guarantee for Jonah, that was not the scene. Cold, stinky, putrid, dark. Can you imagine being in the belly of a well as it dives down and swims around all through the ocean? Can you imagine seasickness at its greatest there? Not knowing if he was coming out. I don't think that God said, hey, Jonah, it's only going to be 3 days and 3 nights. Just hang in there. He didn't know. At least I had an out date. They couldn't keep me past whatever date. But Jonah didn't have an out date. He didn't know if he was going to make it, if he was going to stay, if he was going to die, if he was going to get digested with all the other gross things that got sucked into the mouth of the belly of the well. Cold isolation, distant from everything. No one else was in there to hold hands and sing Kumbaya with him. Cold, dark, isolation, fear, not knowing what the next moment would bring. When I went to prison, the state of Indiana operates like this. You get sentenced to a prison stay. You actually stay in the county jail until the prison has a room for you and has a bed for you. And the Indiana prison population is so overcrowded that it took 4 weeks almost for me to actually get to the prison. And so once you get there, they put all women into one facility. They do a series of assessments and series of health tests. I now know that I possibly couldn't have anything wrong with me because the state of Indiana checked me up, down, upside down, and every way else. Best medical care you ever get, just commit a felony. Just kidding. But you do all of that assessment, and then they assign you to the place you're going to stay and actually do your time. And so that's almost a 7-week process. And in the process of that, every day of the week, and sometimes on Saturdays, about a dozen women come into the facility and a dozen women leave to go to wherever they're going. A dozen women a day all year long. Do the math on that. And where I was at for intake during this assessment period, there was probably about 300 women in my little area. You want to talk about noise? It's never quiet. You want to talk about being lonely? In the midst of 300 people, not a single person cares who you are. They don't know your name. They don't care what you're there for. They don't care if you miss anybody. They don't care if you sit in your bed and cry. They don't care if you get your lunch. They don't care if they find you a toothbrush. The first day I was there, they forgot to give me linens for my bed or pajamas, and I slept in my prison uniform on a plastic mat because they forgot. And guess what? No one woke up in the middle of the night and said, oh my goodness, Christy didn't get her linens. You were just on your own to figure it out. And in that intake process, you get a couple of times a day where you get to go outside and have rec. And rec is you get to walk around in a circle on the outside of the building. But in that situation, you're welcome to do that. And one of them came really early in the morning, and it was about 6:30 in the morning every morning you could go do rec. And because it was so early, nobody else was awake. But I came to be really, really comfortable in that time because no one else was awake. And I would go outside, and I would walk, and I would cry and cry and cry and pray, God, please, please, just bring me some friend. Bring me some comfort. I am so lonely. And the loneliness was almost suffocating. And then one day I'm walking around, and I'm crying, and I'm praying this prayer over and over again, and God's Spirit whispers to me, I'm here. I'm closer than a brother. I'm your refuge in a storm. I'm your ever-present help in times of trouble. When I am all that you need, then I'll bring you someone else. And so I kind of kept that vibe, that idea, and I prayed on that for a couple of days. And one day I went out for rec, and lo and behold, there sat this lady at a picnic table in the middle of the rec yard reading her Bible. I didn't think twice. I just beeline straight for her and said, hi, my name is Christy. Will you be my friend? And she was like, okay. And so we sat there that day, we read the Bible together, and we started formulating a friendship. And actually, I'm still friends with her today. We still keep in touch. But I was only there for 7 weeks. At the end of 7 weeks, you get ripped out of your comfort zone that you've created there, and you get shipped off to somewhere else, only to find a whole new set of friends, and a whole new routine, and a whole new bed, and a whole new everything. And God went with me through all of that, just like God was in the belly of the well with Jonah. And the story doesn't end there. At the end of 3 days, Jonah got puked out, vomited up, regurgitated onto the shore. He didn't stay there. I had an out day. I was never so excited to walk through a pair of gates in my life, ready to come home. Puked out onto the shore again. And guess what Jonah did then? He hightailed his back end to Nineveh. And God used him to speak and tell those people about him. Even though he had just come from the belly of the well. Can you only imagine what he smelled like? Like Tide probably didn't stand a chance, you know? Man. But he went anyways, and he did what God called him to do. I remember coming home from prison and thinking, okay, God, I've been there for 9 months. I'm not the same person that's leaving, that came in here. You've done a work in me. I'm ready to go out and do whatever. And it wasn't easy, because I came home to a city that knew that I had just come from the belly of the well. And I had to find a job. My probation officer says, Christie, part of your probation is you've got to get a job. And I laughed and I said, oh, good luck. Sure, I'm a felon. I didn't even have retail experience. I didn't have fast food experience. I had only ever worked office jobs. So, I mean, like flipping burgers at McDonald's probably wasn't even an option for me. And so I did my job looking for something. You know, I did what I was supposed to do to at least try. And I happened to write a kind of a freelance on a whim article. And I sent it to the Post and Mail and said, hey guys, if you think this is cool, you can run it. If you think it's garbage, throw it away. I don't care. Just thought I would share. And they ran it. And they ran the article and followed it up with a phone call and said, hey, by the way, we have a part-time writing job. Would you be interested in coming and interviewing for it? And I said, yeah, I'll be there. And I come into the conference room, and the publisher and the editor sitting there, and I sit down and I say, hi, my name is Christie Browning. I have a felony. Do you guys want to keep talking? And they're like, okay, sure, you know, tell us what's going on. And I told them exactly what I just come from. And I said, if you don't remember, I was on the front page of your paper a couple of years ago. Oh, now we're connecting the dots. And God gave me the job. 6 months later, I got promoted to section editor. 6 months later, after that, I was the managing editor, a felon who lived in the belly of the well. That's only God. When we talk about God, one of the things that, you know, I always knew as a kid is that God always kept track of my right and wrong. God was there to tell me, yep, that's good. Nope, that's not good. But what I didn't know was a God of redemption. What I didn't know is a God who would look at me and go, it's okay. You're my daughter anyways. I'm going to pick you up, dust you off, and it's going to be okay. In fact, one of the best verses I love in the story of Jonah is in the 2nd chapter, and I'm just going to read this to you because it says it better than I ever could. Jonah says, I went down to the bottoms and the very roots of the mountains, the earth with its bars closed behind me forever. He's describing what it was like in the belly. You have brought up my life from the pit and corruption. Oh, Lord, my God. When my soul fainted upon me, crushing me, I earnestly and seriously remembered the Lord. And my prayer came to you and to your holy temple. Man, I was like, amen, Brother Jonah, because that's exactly how I felt. And he knew a God of redemption. Guess what? God still used him, even after all of that. When I came home from prison, one of my goals was that I was going to work on 5 key areas of my life, and one of them was my marriage. And I didn't know what was wrong there, but I knew God had a plan to redeem something from it. My marriage ended up ending. Not necessarily my choice, but it happened. And I remember thinking that I was in the belly of the well again, and that God didn't know how to take me out of that and how to repair me and put me back together in that. I went through financial bankruptcy, lost my home, lost any connection I had with my church at the time, and lost my marriage. I felt like I'd lost my credibility. But look, I still stand here today. I still know that redemption. I had that awesome job. I now have an awesome business. I am remarried to the most amazing man in the world. And God's given me more than I could have ever put together myself. He's a God of redemption. He's a God of picking you up out of the pit and out of corruption and setting your feet on something strong and sturdy. So I don't know what it is for you today. And I don't know what you might be up against, or what may be kind of hidden in your closet, or maybe something that you just kind of shake your head at when you think about, oh gosh, that's me, I did that. It may be a ruined relationship. It might be some sort of bridge that you burned. I would ask you to raise your hand if anyone else has a felony in here, but I won't do that to you. But whatever it is, whether it's public or not, we all have those little dings against us. And I want you to think what that is, and I want you to know, truthfully, that God is a God of redemption. And as the band comes up to play for you again, I want you to kind of put that in your mind, whatever that is. And I want you to know that because of redemption, tomorrow's always another day. See, the one thing that made the difference for Jonah is that he didn't just swim around in the belly and wait his time. He was repentant. He cried out. Earnestly, he said, I remembered the Lord. I walked a track at the prison, earnestly remembering the Lord, seeking him out, asking forgiveness, looking for healing. And every single one of those things he gives freely to any and to all of us. What is redemption to you? What is redemption for you? Whether you find it in Scripture or you find it in a life that's been broken, like mine, no. There's always an end to the story, and God has never given up on you, and you are never too far gone that he can't say, my daughter, let's go. Out of the belly of the well. Put your feet on sand and walk forward, because I have a Nineveh for you. I have a message for you. I have a purpose for you that has never run dry, if only you accept.